You're good?
Ready. Yep.
Okay,
Good.
excellent. Welcome everyone to the Lincolnville Select Board meeting. It is the 24th of January. And before we get going, Selectman Hand, would you care to read the quote of the evening?
Sure thing. Where duty is plain, delay is both foolish and hazardous. Where it is not, delay may provide both wisdom and safety. Tyrone Edwards.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to open the podium for the Citizens Forum for any non-agenda items. Susan, non-agenda item?
Yeah.
Well, the podium is open for Citizens Forum. Of course. Excellent timing.
I just want you to know that at church this Sunday, prayers of thanksgiving were raised for the comforting sound of snowplows at 3 o'clock in the morning, especially among those who still have to commute to work. So we know it doesn't just happen. So I want to say thank you.
Wonderful. That's a welcome remark. Anyone else for any non-agenda items? Seeing no one jumping up and down, let's move along to the administrator's report.
Just to let the board know and citizens, the town is out to bid for snow removal services for a 3-year period and also for lawn care at our parks and town office and fire stations and wherever else. Those are available here in paper copies. They're also posted on the town's website under requests for proposals and bids or whatever it's called on there. Both bids are due back latter part of February. We're working behind the scenes on the paving bid, the bandstand re-roofing, and the Townhouse Road culvert project, which all should be out before we have our next meeting. For anybody that hasn't licensed their dogs yet, your dog license expired at the end of December. You have till the end of January to avoid the state-imposed late fee. Please register your dog so that we don't have to have the animal control officer chase you down later. Today we had our loss control specialist from workers' compensation was here. Met with the finance director and I for a period of time and then got a tour of this building and the center fire station. Maybe sending some suggestions in the coming weeks or months for slight modifications, and probably will come back at some point in the future to meet with the fire chief to go over their training records and whatnot. Nothing glaring. LD 290, the property tax stabilization program for senior citizens. Notification letters were mailed out at the end of last week to those that are eligible for the program and for those that are not eligible for the program yet applied. We're also working on they're almost ready to go, the second half property tax reminder postcards that we're required to send out by charter in the month of February. So don't forget your second half property taxes will be due in April. And finally, we received the $3,000 safety grant, which we applied for to help partially offset the security system at the fire station. It's a reimbursement program that money came in today. Outside of that, I think everything's on the agenda.
Perfect.
Any questions for David? Alrighty, let's move along to meetings and announcements.
All meetings are here at the town office unless announced otherwise. The first meeting on the agenda, the budget committee meeting, which is supposed to be right now, right here, has been moved to Tuesday, January 31st, 6 p.m. Lakes and Ponds.
Sorry.
Good to know. No problem. Lakes and Ponds Committee meeting, which is supposed to be right here in this room at 7 o'clock, has been postponed till 8 o'clock tonight, right here in this room, and a hybrid meeting for some that couldn't make it tonight. Planning Board is scheduled to meet Wednesday, January 25th, 7 p.m. The Midcoast Solid Waste Corporation Board of Directors meeting that had previously been scheduled for Wednesday evening has been postponed. The likely date is February 8th. at 6:30 at the Camden Town Office. Check our website or Camden's or Midco Solid Waste for the actual rescheduled date when that's finalized. EMS Performance Review Committee meets Thursday, January 26, 6 p.m. at the Northeast Mobile Health Services Rockport Division Office at 6 Park Center Drive in Rockport. Comprehensive Plan Review Committee is scheduled to meet Thursday, January 26, 6:30. School Committee is scheduled to meet Monday, February 6, 6 p.m. at the Lincolnville Central School. Planning Board is scheduled to meet Wednesday, February 8th, 7 p.m. at the town office. Conservation Commission is scheduled to meet, is that right, Mike, 4 o'clock? Thursday, February 9th,
Sounds right.
4 o'clock at the town office.
Yeah.
And the Select Board meets next on Monday, February 13th, 6 p.m.
Excellent, thank you very much. Moving along to upcoming community events. As a reminder to everyone, we have the Heart and Soul community event happening Sunday. That is the 5th of February from 1 to 3 at LCS, and it's going to be in Walsh Common?
Yes.
Excellent. Great, so come one, come all to that. Any other upcoming community events anyone wishes to share? All right, moving along to the meeting minutes from the 9th.
I move that the board approve the January 9, 2023 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you all very much. And next up, agenda item number 6, we have a liquor license renewal from the Whale's Tooth Pub LLC. We do have a representative here from the Whale's Tooth Pub. If anyone has any questions? Any questions?
Yeah, just one.
All right.
And it-
Would you care to come up to the podium?
And this may be very minor, but I noticed, Chris, on section 1 there, line number 1, the dollar amount of gross income for the licensure period for both food and beer is empty. And then I said, oh, okay. And I'm looking at the requirements from the state, and it says if you had a previous license, it needed to be filled out.
Shall I answer that
Well,
one?
please, yeah.
A previous iteration of the Board of Selectmen told licensees that they didn't have to fill that out for local review, but if they were welcome to, but certainly when they submitted it to the Bureau of Liquor Enforcement or whoever they are, they needed to fill it in. If this board wishes to change that direction, that's okay. We
No,
can tell future
No,
applicants
I
to fill that
really
out.
don't want to know, but I just didn't know if it was something we needed to figure out. You know?
Not necessarily. I will share with you that the traditional mix between food and liquor is 70-30, and that's right about where we are right now. If I had an 80% liquor, 20% food, that would be a cause for concern, I think. People hanging from their chandeliers. But it's a full malt liquor, wine, and spirits license, very traditional. And we're just coming before you to get approved for another year of business down there.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions for Chris while we have him up here at the podium? Just thank you so much for coming in. It's always helpful to put faces to names and in case things come up.
Yeah. No,
Make
happy to
sure
be
that we
here.
can stamp
Absolutely.
everything. Yeah.
And I will just say that we're starting year 3. Martha and myself, Martha's my wife and business partner, and we're just starting year 3 at the Whale's Tooth Pub. It's been, the last 2 years have been very challenging with COVID, supply chain issues, a severe talent undersupply issue where there's still 2 applicants for every, two roles for every 1 applicant. And then most recently in 2022, inflation, who has hit small businesses on both sides of the P&L. Number one, you have a customer contraction where they're putting more discretionary income into their gas tank. And then our cost of goods are up 30%, and I've only passed about 11% of that onto the customer. So we appreciate the town's support as a small business, and we look forward to serving delicious food and pub fare throughout the year, and taking the journey forward. So I just wanted to mention that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just have one quick question.
Oh, sure.
Please.
So number 3, indicate the type of license applying for. So which license?
It's the
would
Class
this
A restaurant lounge license. It's checked later into the application.
Okay, just want to make sure, didn't know if on the first page it had to be checked.
Yeah, maybe before it gets sent off, we'll just make sure that that one's,
Okay,
yeah,
good. David, do you have the original?
Of course I do.
Okay, fantastic.
yeah, which will be,
You'll check that and then we'll get it up to the state with a nice $1,500 check.
perfect. Excellent, so I'll entertain a motion, please.
I move to the board approve and sign the liquor license application submitted by the Whale's Tooth Ventures LLC, doing business as the Whale's Tooth Pub.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Thank you very much, and thank you for coming out tonight.
Thanks, Chris.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Nice to see everyone happy here.
And moving along, we have the Chair of the Lakes and Ponds Committee here to give us an annual update.
Thank you. It's good to see you all in person. It's been a while. My purpose here tonight is to give you an update on our activities over the last year. I think we've routinely done that. I think it's fallen off some with the pandemic in terms of committees coming in and briefing you, but I think it's a good idea for you to hear what we're doing and to get your feedback too on the directions that we're taking things. Another thing that I want to do here today is give you recommendations on next steps for the unencapsulated polystyrene float and dock program or effort that we have underway, but I want to first start with some of our activities. We have a really great committee. They're really dedicated. Many of them have been with the committee for many, many years. They understand what we're about, and they really care very deeply about the lakes. Also, we've got a good relationship with the lake associations, and many of the committee members themselves are also representatives of the lake associations. So that works really well in terms of having a place for the lake associations to get together and hear what's happening in the other lakes, and also for the town to be able to share in issues that are coming up with the lakes themselves. One of the things we do as a committee is try to monitor conditions on the lakes. At our monthly meetings, we go through a checklist of water quality issues, construction issues, environmental issues that might be there, wildlife kinds of things. So in a very systematic way, we go over all of those issues and kind of get a sense of what's going on with the lakes. We can brainstorm about those issues, and if there's something that we want to flag to bring up, to bring to your attention, we can do that as well. This past summer's monitoring has been really good in terms of water quality that we're seeing. Some of the SECI disc readings that they do that tells you what the clarity of the water is better than what we've seen in some past years. Also, oxygen levels have been really good in the water column, which is an indication that you don't have eutrophication going on, and algae blooms and that kind of thing. And the bacteriological monitoring, like looking at E. coli levels in the water, have also been good and better than what we've seen in the past. The only areas where we still potentially have some problems are the monitoring that's done by the Drake Store culvert that goes under Route 52. Historically, that's been a place where there have been elevated levels. This year, I think there were 2 values that were over the standard levels, but the rest of the time it was good, and then when they went back to take a look at it, it wasn't high. That may be partly because it was a relatively dry summer. There's some rain in the spring, but then it really dried up in the summer. The water levels came down. So that means you don't have as much water coming in from the watershed and flowing into the pond, which is the kind of thing that will generally flush out E. coli if it's there. But the really good thing that we saw in Norton Pond is that even though there were some elevated levels at the culvert, at the Breezemere Beach, at the town beach, we had very low levels, lower levels than we've seen in many years. Susan is also a member of the Lakes and Ponds Committee, and she's also associated with the Lake McGuntacook Watershed Association, and she does the sample collections at both sites, so she keeps on top of it. Our plan is that if we do see high levels at the beach, the Watershed Association and the town ends up doing a repeat sampling through the Water Association to see if that persists more than a day. So the sampling is done sort of before the weekend with time to do it again to get results back on Friday to see if we would need to close the beach down. But we haven't had to do that. But if we do, we want to be in a position as a committee to do follow-up monitoring to try to find what the source of that elevated E. coli is. And that's something that we include in our budget every year, setting aside enough money so that we can do that kind of sampling if it looks as though the conditions are going to present themselves that would require it. Moving on, I want to talk some about our Phragmites project. You know, Phragmites is also has the name common reed, and you see just miles and miles of it if you drive down to Boston on 95 when you're going through New Hampshire or through southern Maine, and it's really taking over much of the Northeast now. It's replacing cattails and other vegetation, and it really crowds out everything. So ecologically, it's not a good thing, and it really spreads. The Waldo County Conservation Commission people had come down to look at some invasive species issues, and they saw that we had some Phragmites growing in the wetland that's next to the trailer parking lot at Breezemere Park. And the concern was if the seeds from that were to blow into Norton Pond, it could cause a real problem, especially since it's so close to that marshy area by Drake's Culvert, and that could all be replaced with a really thick stand of Phragmites. So we brought that issue to you as a board, and you supported the idea of us going in and trying to manage it, which required getting a permit from the state to be able to work in wetlands. And we've been doing that now for 3 years, and I think we're really happy with the results that we've seen. Each year, the Phragmites that has come back after we've cut it down has been much less robust than what we saw originally. When we first saw the stand there were fronds of the stuff that were going up 13, 14 feet, and there was nothing that you could see growing in between it. By the next year, we maybe had, would you say, 5 or 6 foot stalks. And this past year, nothing got much higher than about 2 feet. But we also actually started cutting a little earlier in the season as well. And the really great thing about it is we saw a lot of native vegetation coming up where the Phragmites were. So we took a different kind of cutting approach where we're being much more surgical about it in terms of cutting out the Phragmites, but leaving in the natives so that they can come up. We also got some assistance from the town. I brought up to Dave that there was a large Norway maple there that's above where the stand was that has lots and lots of seeds. Norway maples are considered invasive. So we were able to cut that down so the seeds that would be coming from that tree wouldn't end up repopulating the marsh area. So I think we're well on our way to restoring that marsh. It takes a lot of work. We probably went out 6 to 8 times during the year, sometimes in groups, sometimes just one person at a time. We also did some work with the McGuntacook Watershed Association, and we got some people from the association, from the public, to join us. And that's the kind of thing we'd like to do more of in the past. At the beginning, before the pandemic, the idea was to really involve civic groups in town. the school, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, those kinds of organizations to help do this, but it didn't seem to make sense at the beginning of the pandemic, but maybe with things opening up some, we'll be able to do more of that. So then it also becomes an educational thing for people to understand about invasive species and what they can do in on their own properties as well. Now I want to move to the unencapsulated polystyrene project. And at the inception of this project, I think two of you who are on the board weren't with the board at that time, so I'll give you a little history as well. Back in 2017, we were approached by the Conservation Commission in the town of Camden. They were in the process of adopting an ordinance that would essentially ban unencapsulated polystyrene in floats and docks. And what it said was that anyone putting in a new dock or repairing an old one would not be able to use unencapsulated polystyrene. And the unencapsulated polystyrene are those blue styrofoam blocks that were just very commonly used to float floats and docks. And so so that new projects couldn't use unencapsulated polystyrene, but people were given 5 years to remove their floats or docks that had it, and that 5-year date came due November 1st of this year. So in Camden now, there's to be no more unencapsulated polystyrene. And an interesting thing about that is that for Lincolnville float and dock owners in Lake McGuntacook, their docks are taken to the Bog Bridge area on 105, but in order to get them there, they'd have to be floated across Camden. And I guess a judgment's been made that that would not be acceptable under the Camden ordinance. So for people who are living on Lake McGuntacook, to the extent they're taking advantage of that service from Lake City Docks, they will no longer be able to do that. So if this fall they had docks that were taken over, they won't be able to have them brought back. If people are pulling up the docks onto their own shoreline, though, in Lincolnville, they would. Olive Norton Pond, of course, is in Lincolnville, and none of those floats and docks are taken over to Bog Bridge. All of those come to the land that Lake City Docks is leasing from the town. And it was interesting, I was down there just this Saturday taking a look at them. There were about 40 docks there, and about 50 docks there. And of the 50 docks that were there, only 2 of them had unencapsulated polystyrene. So I think that the word is getting out. So when we got the request from Camden, we talked about it on the Lakes and Ponds Committee, and then came to you with some options for you to consider. And those options were a no action option. The second one would be to adopt an ordinance similar to the ordinance that Camden put in place. And the third was an outreach and education option. And we talked about the pros and cons, and ultimately you decided that it made sense to go with the outreach and education. And as part of that outreach, you sent out a letter to each and every shorefront property owner. I think it was about 300 or so letters, along with a brochure that was put together by the Lakes and Ponds Committee, and we had printed. And you'll find both the letter and a copy of the brochure in your notes for the meeting. The other proviso of taking that approach was that you asked us to continue monitoring floats and docks in Lincolnville, and then to periodically reassess whether this is the way we want it to continue going, or whether we might want to put an ordinance in place or something else. So we've been monitoring now for 5 seasons, starting in 2018, and we've seen some pretty good progress. We've gone from 93 unencapsulated floats and docks in all of the lakes and ponds in Lincolnville down to 39. So that's a 60% reduction. Not as much as what they'll be getting in Camden. They'll be getting pretty close to 100%, but I think that our approach is paying off, but it sort of raises the question, are we sort of at the hard cases at this point? Do we need to do something more if we want to reduce this more? I mean, our hope as the Lakes and Ponds Committee is to try to get that number as close to 0 as we can. So we've been taking a look at what we might want to recommend to you at this point, and we came up with the same 3 options that we had originally. Do nothing and let this thing take care of itself. In time it will, but it might be a very long time. Go with an ordinance, would probably give results maybe 5 years out in terms of getting it down to 0, or do some form of outreach and education again. And we had some really good discussions in the board, and we really looked at the pros and cons. I think that no action was something that we didn't want to see, because we think there's still the ability to get more. And we had some sort of initially strong proponents of going with an ordinance. But then when we kind of got into what would the details of an ordinance be, what would be the cost to the town in terms of putting together an ordinance, getting legal advice, having to put it before the public in a meeting, it seems that those costs were very high. The other thing we're learning is that it's getting more and more expensive now to repair and replace floats and docks with inflationary pressures, especially on construction materials. And I think when we first talked to you about what it would cost, it was in the order of $5,000 or so 5 years ago. Now it's up closer to $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. So for someone having to comply with this, it's a pretty tough hit that may really make it very difficult for people. So on balance, we decided that it made more sense to do more education and outreach, recognize the fact that there are probably some new lakeshore homeowners who aren't aware of this as an issue, and to go out with another letter reminding people that this is still a concern, congratulating them for the progress that we've made to date, but this is something that we would like to see happen. So along those lines, we've put together a draft letter that you have in your package that includes some of the ideas and thoughts that you might want to include were you to choose this option, but it's kind of a starting point. So that's where things stand now. Be interested, I can answer any of your questions. Susan has been very involved in all of this as well. We had a really good discussion with Lake City Docks. Izzy, who is one of the co-owners, met with David and Susan and me and really had a good discussion of how they think things are going and whether this is going to take care of itself. They say it's very difficult now even to find the blue styrofoam when people replace things, and it's cheaper generally to even have the encapsulated a blue styrofoam, so that helps move things in the right direction. But there are still some people who would rather not spend the money if they're sufficiently happy with what they've got at this point. And if Susan could be recognized, if she wants to add anything to this discussion, she's available to, I don't know if you'd like to do that or not, Susan, at the invitation of the chair.
Sure. Any questions for Gary while we've got him up there? Yeah, Kern.
So, first off, thank you very much. Very informative, but the work that you people have done for the town to help preserve what we have with our lakes and ponds is just unbelievable, and I thank you. My thought on going forward, what if, now this is just a scenario, what if we had another type of document or letter go out to the taxpayers, to the people who have yet to, or maybe we should include all the other people, just so that we're not singling anybody out, although we are. Reiterate what we want them to do, or what we need them to do. Put a 2-year deadline on it, and then go right to an ordinance if we don't have any. I mean, it's a pretty important thing. It really is. We've had a lot of luck with people saying, yeah, you know something, we really need to do this, and they've done it. I think people can afford to make that change. My personal opinion.
Yeah. One of
Has
the,
that been discussed?
yeah, we talked about something like that when we've been doing the surveys. We've been sort of careful not to, and it would be fairly difficult in some ways to actually identify who the property owner
Yeah.
is. So that's one part of it. And the other issue is sort of enforcement, like sort of how do you enforce something like a 2-year deadline to do something? I don't know. I guess a lawyer would have to tell us whether something like that would need to be incorporated into an ordinance, which then gets you into some of the cons that are associated with doing an ordinance. But if you could make that work and enforce it and be able to match people with having problems, it would get us there more quickly. But I think there might be some issues entailed with it. I hear what you. It's a good creative thought.
I mean, 5 years is a fair amount of time.
Yeah.
Two more years puts it at 7 years. It's like, okay, people, come on, you know, and we've done it without, for lack of a better way to say it, playing hardball. You know, and I think we and the town has been more than patient. It's something that needs to be done. It's being done everywhere. Some towns are taking a harder stance, and we've opted to take an educational stance, which I am all for that. And I just, in my mind, I think if we do one more round of educational, but yet this time around have an end date and a plan, what's going to happen after the two. Now that's one person's opinion, and I think we've made some major progress. But I'd like to finish it.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way of getting that thought into the letter that goes out in some way.
Yeah.
That talks about, we don't want to be in a position of having to put in place an ordinance to enforce
Good
this,
way to put that.
which is sort of kind of more of a shot across the bow than the way the letter is written right now. So that could be strengthened.
Yeah.
Mike, you had a
Well,
comment
yeah,
or question?
And like Kern said, thanks a heck of a lot. You guys are doing great work. Kern, I agree with you on the need for closure. I like that approach. And as far, and having a bit of a stick in the letter, a bit of a threat. But at the same time, it'd be nice to have a little honey there too as well. So consequently, are you aware of any grants, funding opportunities to help people who want to convert from,
That was my question.
yeah, I mean, I would like to think that there's money out there because it's such a important issue.
Right.
We've looked some and haven't seen that. I know there's been some discussion in the lake associations of trying to use the associations as a way to be able to provide some help to people where it might be difficult. You know, either technical help or volunteer help to make it happen, and then maybe even some financial assistance in some ways. And that's something that the lake associations have been perhaps managing a bit. But I'm not aware of grants for that particular purpose.
Have you looked into the Natural Resource Council of Maine, see if they have, I just wanted, that was my thought. It seems like with all of the various funding programs and maybe we just haven't turned over the right rock yet.
Well, we could make some fresh calls to both the state agencies and some of the nonprofits, the environmental organizations.
Or even Coastal Mountains Land Trust, or, you know, that if, maybe it's just a conversation that hasn't been had and we could pull together some funds, or, I don't know, but it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I would, you would think there's some sort of funding out there to help people, analogous to replacing your incandescent light bulbs,
Right.
something like that. But I'm also wondering if, well, that right there is enough work. So I'm not going to pile more work on it. But yeah.
Well, I had a couple questions, getting back to your meeting with Lake City. Is there how many Lincolnville docks are going to that 105 storage spot with Blue Foam? Do we know that number?
No, we don't know that number, but they're not going to be able to come back.
Right.
Okay, so but I guess we could take a look at that number versus the number that we did see in Maguntacook and kind of get a feel for what might be there.
Yeah, and so in your discussions with Lake City, did you talk about providing them with some of the educational materials to go? I would think that they're,
Yes.
maybe it's wrong to assume, but I would think that they would be having that communication with their customers, because I'm sure they want the business.
Right, and I think that's part of the outreach and education piece. When we met with Ibby, we gave her, I don't know, was it a dozen or so of the pamphlets, and she said, "This is great. I'll use these. This helps us make our case that we want people to upgrade." Because once they're dealing with old docks, they become very difficult to transport, to hoist out of the water. You know, sometimes they're rotten. When they get to the parking lot, they start shedding the blue pieces, and I know that people have complained about that as well. So all around, aesthetically, it makes sense, and it really supports their business because they're in the business of repairing and building docks too. So they were happy to receive that material. And we've put up some, we've put pamphlets up on some of the bulletin boards, like at the general store and Drake's, and there are a few other places around town so people could see it. But I'm sure there are some shorefront homeowners who aren't aware of this at all because they're new or have forgotten.
Other questions for Gary? Gary, while we have you up here, and I'm going to throw this out to the board. So what does the board think, looping back to that whole carrot and the stick, maybe a little bit heavier on the stick? I think that this letter that you put together for us is really comprehensive. I think you touch on all of the really pertinent points and what you've accomplished. And certainly, I feel like you sort of dip your toe into with, Lincolnville's avoided ordinances banning, and so I'm just curious what the board's thoughts are in terms of maybe strengthening that language in that second to last paragraph of saying,
Well, you could say that the town of Lincolnville hopes to avoid creating ordinances banning the use of unencapsulated polystyrene. Just
But if
suggesting that we might.
yeah, but if we don't start seeing more compliance.
Yeah, then follow up that with a however, you know, some ominous warning.
Time frame to it, as Karen suggested,
yeah.
is state we're gonna reassess in 2 years or a number like that.
Yeah.
And if we don't see substantial additional change for the good,
Yeah.
the town will likely have to consider an ordinance to address this.
I
Yeah.
really like that, reassess in 2 years. So
Yeah.
it's less, if you don't do this, we will do
Right.
this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, we'll look at the situation in 2 years and
Or
reassess.
how about, because 2 years, because we have this conversation annually, it's that we will be reassessing annually
Yeah.
to determine if our efforts are effective. Something to that,
Yeah.
because we're going to be talking about this in a year. And I would love it. I feel really optimistic with educational efforts, primarily because of who this committee is and your efficacy in the work that you do. So, I feel really good about the educational component. I also feel really situationally good about our neighbors and what's happening with Lake City, and it could be sort of a confluence of circumstances where the motivation will be greater this year, but
And I think just receiving another letter from you would make a difference too, because you're saying it's not just a one-off, here it is, 5 years later, made
Yep.
some great progress, thanks to
Yep.
everyone who's done this, but we've got to do more, and we're going to continue to reassess, and there may be an ordinance in the works.
yep. Yeah, I feel good about that.
Oh, I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of up to you folks to do the wordsmithing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that, we'll come up with another version. We can then, share that with Dave, who perhaps can share it
Yep.
with you, and
Yep.
if you think it's ready for prime time, or you want to make some
Perfect.
some edits to it, we can go with it. The thing that we thought would be important would be to try to get it out as early as we can before the spring season, because you might actually be able to impact what people do this year, potentially.
I would think that we'd be able to review it at our next meeting.
Okay.
And hit the go button, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get it done by then.
Okay.
We've got a meeting tonight.
Sorry.
See, there you go. Light a fire under everybody. Does anyone have any questions for Susan? Or Susan, did you have anything you wish to share?
One
Okay.
little thing I would add is, Susan Silverio, Lakes and Ponds Committee, I was a little concerned, given that Camden has finally drawn the line for non-encapsulated foam, that becomes a very inexpensive option for people to purchase what's no longer legal in Camden, and Izzy only knew of one example of that happening.
Interesting.
But those unused docks that are no longer legal in Camden could be available to people in Lincolnville. So it seems like this is very timely to prevent that from happening.
Excellent point.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Thank you. Anything else on this right now? Again, thank you so much for all of your good work and the excellent presentation.
We enjoy it, and we have fun as a committee, and we feel like we're getting some things done. So,
Yeah, and thank you for being out there in the hot temperatures, hacking away at invasive vegetation.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, moving along, we have a update regarding the secondary hoist down at the pier. David, do you care to take this?
Sure.
Take it away.
This past year, we took the secondary hoist once we got the primary back up and running, we took the secondary out of service due to corrosion. Worked with the folks from Rockport Steel about what could or should be done to that. Also, to bring it back, to rejuvenate it, basically replace it. Also had the Public Facilities Director make contact with the folks from the Department of Labor about safety requirements so that we weren't just replacing it in kind and then finding out we spent thousands of dollars that we shouldn't have done. So we have the standards for not only construction and operation, but for training and inspection that needs to be accomplished with it. And I guess we outlined a couple of different options available to the board. Not to piggyback on what Gary says, but do nothing is always an option. Do nothing and remove what we have. Do nothing, leave it there. Do nothing and not remove it, not replace it. Install a new hoist with funds from our harbor savings account, and then include the item in the upcoming budget that you're going to get here in a couple of weeks, and then tell you, here's the cost, and then put a line in revenue from harbor savings, which would probably be everybody's recommendation at this point. So that's kind of where we are.
Correct me if I'm wrong on any of these accounts, but I had a conversation with a harbor committee member against his will, just to get a read on what their conversation was. And my understanding is that hoist is used, especially during the busy season, that, it's a desired piece of infrastructure. And then did you start talking, or did the harbor committee start talking about numbers and then they decided to table it based on cost, or that's where my understanding
Yeah,
is
it's a little
foggy.
fuzzy in my mind too. I'm not even sure we had numbers at the
Yeah.
last meeting.
Maybe David Roundy was going to
Yeah, I think that.
do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we definitely had a discussion about some of the safety concerns, and, there's a desire to do what we might do at our own business or at home with our own stuff versus a municipal setting.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure that we knew that we could check the boxes so that when we had not like the guy that came today, but somebody similar, loss control specialist, and say, oh,
Yeah.
well, that looks new. Why did you do this? Because that isn't allowable anymore. That we want to obviously avoid that situation, which is always the concern when you're replacing something in kind that's been there 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Does that price that came from Rockport Steel, does that factor in modern day parameters, meaning, or did somebody just throw a number at replacing what is actually there?
Excuse me. It was a replace, but it really an upgrade. It would look to be galvanized,
Okay, that was my question.
which I'm not sure the existing one was.
Wasn't it just painted steel,
Yeah, I think so. I got a picture if you want to.
which was part of the reason
Look
why
at
it went south?
Yeah, well, that and it's in a tough environment. It's in salt spray every time the tide comes up and there's a wind blowing.
Yeah.
It's not conducive to steel, but you need the strength, so.
Yeah.
So I had a few questions about hoists.
Yep.
Our hoist. How often is a primary hoist taken out of service?
Oh, not frequently, unless there's a mechanical failure. We replaced, it's got a rope that's coils up and coils down, and then you swing it out. We had some mechanical challenges last year with the hydraulic system, which had a period of time of weeks that it was out, and it was not a good time of year to be out. But repaired, put back into service, and away we went. It's primarily, there's more activity in the spring and fall with both hoists. The primary, which is located, I would say, on what I would describe as the northeast corner, so if you're looking towards Islesboro, it's the one on the left, away from the ferry. There's more water there. It's more user-friendly in terms of dockage. That's why it's used primarily. The other is used, and then throughout the fishing season, a number of the fishermen use it to lift bait down onto their boats.
The secondary.
Well, more everybody wants to use the primary unless you're there already and I need to get my stuff on and off because of the tide or whatever, or it's out of service.
So there are times when both are being used simultaneously.
Yeah.
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we look at the option B and rule it out if that's really not a good idea, but I think we should at least consider that. Do we need two hoists?
Yeah, well, for that reason, I'm inclined to recommend to the board to consider option D and have it in the budget. You know, I'm thinking about some of the other really big projects that we want to move forward down at the harbor. And it, for me, in my decision-making process, it's always helpful to have the good, the bad, and the ugly there in the budget to weigh out against each other, whether it's something you really wanted to, and while we have done very well with our harbor savings account, the truth is that the infrastructure down there is really expensive, and some of the things that we're looking to do down there are really expensive, and so just having all the cards on the table going through budget season, budget time, will be able, I think, for us to be truly informed to say, do we need that hoist or not? And perhaps have another opportunity for, say, the harbor committee or other interested parties to weigh in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Is kind of where I'm coming from.
I guess my last question is, what is the condition of the primary hoist?
It's functioning. You mean in terms of, it's similarly but different construction.
Okay.
What I would call the secondary is all steel. The primary is got a wooden piling and then that extends up above the deck and then chains out to the hoist part. So they function similarly, but they're constructed differently. The primary is in better condition, better shape, obviously, because we're looking to replace this one. A concern about including in the budget is if something happens between now and June, or actually I'm going to say this year, because if we get the go-ahead in June, you order it in June or July, it gets done 6 to 8 weeks later, most of the season's over. I mean, we've made it through the end of last year with one, but just keep that in your thought process that
I remember in some of our like our workshop with the harbor committee, and this is also part of like not making my thought process and not making the decision tonight is again, my memory is somewhat fuzzy, but I feel like I heard both really strong arguments for we don't actually need that. We could use the space for something else. And it's also really very handy. So I'm not resolved in which is the primary.
Yeah, I suspect it depends on the user you talk to.
Sure.
Just like any one of
Yeah.
our.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Josh.
I just, one last thought. I keep getting new thoughts. If no hoist was functioning, can the fishermen still do their job? It obviously would be a lot more challenging, but can they still move bait and move traps?
Yeah, a lot more elbow grease. Yeah, yeah.
But like, if we didn't replace the secondary and the primary was out for 3 weeks, in the height of the season, could they make it work?
I mean, they have.
They would. They might not be happy about it,
Yeah.
but they would.
I'm sure they wouldn't be happy.
I mean, they'd obviously have to. I mean, if you're making a living fishing, there's a window of time where the lobsters are moving or whatever, within which you have to make your money. And if that means you've got to shovel bait into a tote and slide it down the ramp and put it in another
Your day starts earlier.
you're gonna do it. You're gonna do it, or you go to Belfast and pick it up, or
Yeah.
you make an alternate arrangement somehow.
It's not ideal for sure.
It's not ideal.
Not good for the health or wellness of the fishermen.
Yeah. Steve, I feel like you had a pensive look on your face a while back, and I
At
wanted
least
to.
I've heard several of the fishermen talking about wanting both hoists. And David said it a minute ago, I'm mostly concerned on if something happens between now and even July or August, they're in a not a good position. And so I'm more a proponent of this is something that's been talked about for. There's a variety of things down there, as you mentioned, that it feels like we're behind on in general, taking care of stuff at the harbor. There's money sitting there, and in my mind, this is something that the majority of that I've talked to, at least the fishermen down there, want this. That's.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with what Steven said, but I feel better. I mean, I'd like to move this forward right now with the harbor savings account. But I would feel better if I got the word from the harbor committee that it's an urgent need, or it's a need that doesn't want to wait, should it break down, and it doesn't wait until June, July. And apparently we're not going to get that. So
Well, have we asked them?
I have not. I assume that's been discussed though.
We can, I mean, I'm not saying that the time between now and your next meeting isn't important, but if that information is important, we can convey that to the harbor committee chair and suggest that he call a harbor committee meeting and get together and put that down and send you a note and tell you it's critical or it's not. And
Yeah, I mean, I would feel better. I'm not opposed to it. I just, in all of the meetings and the workshops and the conversations we've had, there's been, in the pandemic, like there's been a lot of water under the bridge in terms of what's important and what isn't. And I would feel a lot more resolved having a consensus from the harbor committee.
okay.
Not just a member showing up,
No.
but like a consensus from the committee. would be
So would
great.
I, yeah.
So we table this to the next
Yeah.
meeting.
I feel that we've talked with them about this before, but I feel the end result or the end of the conversation was, it'd be nice to have it, but it hasn't been there for a while.
Right, so it would be nice to
You know what I
revisit
mean?
that and have
So I
that.
think it would be great to have direction from the harbor committee before we make a decision whether to move it on or whether to just,
Yeah,
That
put it
sounds
in
good.
front of the voters in June or.
yep, all right, so we're going to table it pending recommendation from the harbor committee. Excellent discussion all, thank you. Moving along to select person updates. Kern, do you have anything for
I
us?
wish I did. I
We all do.
Obviously, our Midco Solid Waste Board of Directors meeting was canceled, and it was disappointing. That's disappointing to me. And I will definitely relay my thoughts about that, and I'm also going to strongly suggest that we get this done. And I've had a lot to say the last time they canceled the board meeting, and didn't go over very well. I can't imagine that this is gonna go over any different, but that's all I got.
Alrighty. Josh, anything for us?
I also don't have anything, yeah, I'm disappointed. I was ready to talk trash tomorrow night.
So was I, and that's odd for me.
Money trash.
Yeah. But we will, if you don't meet in 2 weeks, then something's terribly wrong. But, yeah, hopefully we meet in 2 weeks and vote on that budget and approve it and pass that on to the towns.
Excellent, okay. Mike, anything?
Yeah, just that the MMA Maine Municipal Association Legislative Policy Committee will be meeting Thursday to look at the legislation that's currently in the hopper, proposed in Augusta right now. So this is your chance between anybody out there or anybody here to let me know what input that committee should give. So this isn't picking focuses of lobbying efforts. This is just the legislation that's in the hopper right now. What is the MMA's stance going to be?
And you prefer people to call you, email you, send a carrier pigeon?
Any of those would work.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of cats between us and the road, so I wouldn't do the pigeon. Yeah.
Okay.
No, give me a call.
Okay.
Or email. Yeah.
All right, awesome, thank you. Steve, anything?
Nothing.
And same here, but hopefully next time we will have an update. All right, thank you all. Moving along, we do have the treasurer and payroll warrants to approve and sign.
Well, I move that the board approve and sign the treasurer and payroll warrants.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Thank you all very much. And is there any other business the board needs to attend to before we enter into executive session? Seeing nothing, I will entertain a motion for that executive session.
I move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of conducting the annual performance evaluation of the town administrator pursuant to Title I MRSA Section 4056A.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for keeping us company.
Would you pass that down?
Yes. You sure you don't want to hang on to it for
I know.
signing
We always
things?